So last week I did a comparison video looking at 4 different dancers, 4 different companies, and how they performed the role of Aurora. This video had quite a good response, so I think I'm going to do a comparison series. And today we're going to look at Kitri Act 1, performed by the Royal Ballet, the Paris Opera, the Bolshoi, and ABT. I'm going to explain why I've chosen each specific dancer to represent their company. I'm going to compare the different styles, and then at the end I'm going to reveal my all-time favourite interpretation of Kitri and why I didn't include this dancer in the comparison. And just as a reminder, everything I say about the dancers in this video is very much just my opinion, it's my interpretation of their performances. That's one of the wonderful things about ballet, is that it's an art form, so it is open to interpretation, and I do love hearing from you in the comments, especially when you have a different perspective. It's really interesting to hear. Also keep in mind that I am limited with the videos that are available online, so I've done my best to find recordings that are as clear as possible, but it's not always easy. So the reason why I've chosen these dancers isn't necessarily because I love their interpretation the most, even though they are all incredible. It was more that I felt they represented the style of their company the best. What I really love about Kitri is that even though the character is Spanish, with each dancer you can still clearly see their style of dancing and where they've trained. So starting off with the Royal Ballet. Now I did consider a few other dancers. One in particular was Akane Takeda, beautiful dancer who gives a really beautiful and quite English interpretation of this role. But in the end, I came back to Marianela Nuñez. I did feature her in the previous video for her role of Aurora. I just felt that she's so interesting because even though she's Argentinian, you can really see how the Royal Ballet's style has influenced her interpretation. And I also felt it was quite an interesting comparison, if you did watch last week's video, to see how as Aurora or at least I felt she was quite contained, quite regal, confident, calm, friendly, whereas Kitri, she's a lot more fiery, bubbly, energetic and fun. In terms of her technique, we always see incredibly clean lines and very precise positions, and also her infamous pirouettes and incredible balances. She manages to really control her movements, but without looking too stiff or restrained. I feel like she really strikes the balance between very English, precise, clean, detailed technique, and then Kitri's more lively, playful, dramatic energy. You really do get this sense that she's a very confident woman, showing off her party tricks to the villagers and just showing everyone what she can do and having fun with it. So the original ballet, Don Quixote, was choreographed by Marius Petipa, but this specific version is Carlos Acosta's that he did for the Royal Ballet. Now moving on to the Paris Opera, again I gave the chosen dancer a lot of thought. I considered Dorothée Gilbert, Léonore Boulac, Valentine Colsante. They're all incredible dancers and their interpretations are really interesting. However, I just felt myself coming back to the extraordinary Aurélie Dupont. I know I chose her for Aurora in my previous video and I didn't want to repeat myself too much, but I just found her interpretation the most interesting. I felt I had the most to say about Aurélie than the other dancers. Hopefully you might find the comparison interesting between her interpretation of Aurora, which is quite girly, a little coquettish, and then her interpretation of Kitri, which again is very like fiery and playful, and you get to see how versatile she is as an actor. What I love about Aurélie is that despite the music, the decor, she has all the right flourishes, she has this lovely fiery energy. Why does it still feel like Aurélie is speaking Spanish, but in a thick French accent? And I think it comes down to her wonderful French elegance, and I just love that this chicness is so ingrained in her French training, and I just love that despite the fact that she's playing a character of a completely different nationality, she is still undeniably French. So in terms of her technique, again similar to the English style, we see very clean lines, classical positions, very detailed, intricate, beautiful footwork. And despite the huge energy and passion she brings, her dancing is still in no way messy. So once again, the choreography is originally Petit Pas, but it was adapted by Nureyev. And Nureyev being a Soviet dancer, you can definitely see some Vaganova influences as well as the French style. And I think what makes his choreography like instantly recognizable is these little coupés that you see quite early on. So obviously the French are known for their precise, strong, articulated footwork, and I just wanted to focus on Aurélie soutenu at the end of this solo because I literally gasped when I first saw it. It has to be one of the cleanest soutenus I've seen after a long diagonal of turns from fifth. I'm going to play it in slow motion so you can see. Even though she must be quite tired, she might even feel a little wobbly, that fifth position is so tight and clean you couldn't even pass a piece of paper between those feet. And that is quite a classic example of how detailed and clean the French footwork can be. So next, moving on to our Vaganova representative, I was really spoilt for choice and I looked at dancers from both the Bolshoi and the Mariinsky. So many dancers, and there were lots of really nice clear videos too. I would recommend you check out Diana Vishneva, Maria Khoreva, Elena Litkina, Elena Yasiva. But eventually I decided to go with the legendary Svetlana Zakharova. Despite the fact that the video quality isn't great, I do love that she is such a clear representation of Vaganova technique. And I also quite liked that it was filmed at a similar time to Aurélie's video, which gives a fairer comparison. She has the most incredible extensions. You'll notice her arms are big. She has a greater use of épaulement. If we compare her to Aurélie and Marianela, their arm positions are rounder, whereas Svetlana's are much more extreme. Svetlana really projects out to her audience. She fills the space wonderfully. Her style is a little more gymnastic than the English and the French style. And also Svetlana has a very typical Vaganova physique in that her limbs are very slim and long, her neck is very long, and she has obviously incredible flexibility and particularly very mobile feet. And so, as like with the other dancers, even though this character is Spanish, you look at Svetlana and you instantly know she's Vaganova trained. She gives such a beautiful performance and it is so very different to the others. Next, for our American dancer, this week I've chosen one from ABT. So ABT is known for fusing different dance styles that bring a really diverse and eclectic mix. So they combine French, Italian, Russian styles and then add like a sprinkling of American athleticism, and it makes for a really interesting style in itself. So in the end, I decided to go with the show-stopping Isabella Boylston, and Isabella is a wonderful demonstration of this. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a video of her performing on stage. I do have one of her in the studio, so we won't be able to see her costume or the scenery, but we do at least get to see her interpretation and why ABT's style is so interesting. You can see her arm movements here really resemble the Vaganova style. They're big, expressive, they're quite exaggerated. And if we compare her to, say, Marianela, the arms go higher and they're bigger, whereas Marianela's are more rounded and controlled, which is quite typical of the old European style. So definitely with the arms, you can see more in common with Svetlana. However, Isabella has also performed the Paris Opera version at the Paris Opera, which is so interesting to compare because you can see that even though she's not purely French trained, she does somehow fit in with the company really well. And it's really thanks to Isabella's incredible versatility. So in this comparison, I feel like you can really see her athleticism. Her arms are a lot more exaggerated, where Aurélie are definitely more classical. But just like the French, she gives a lot of attention to precision and the articulation of her beautiful footwork. And then on top of everything, there's this real athleticism, which is different to all the other three styles we compared. And finally, moving on to my all-time favourite interpretation of Kitri, and you may not be surprised to hear I've chosen Natalia Osipova. So the reason why I didn't include her in the comparison is because I felt with the other dancers they've really stayed true to their training and their company style. And even though Natalia is a very clear example of Vaganova training, I feel like her interpretation of Kitri is something else. Her passion, her energy, her incredible technique, the height of her jumps, her use of the space, the projection to her audience, the connection with the other dancers, it all transcends her style and makes her performance truly unique and memorable. When you watch her, you're not thinking, oh, this is a Vaganova trained dancer. You are just absorbed in what she's doing. And her performance is one of the few that's really stayed with me over the years. And I felt like even though I didn't include her in the comparison, I felt like she still deserved some recognition for this incredible and very memorable interpretation. So those are my thoughts on these 4 different interpretations of Kitri, well 5 including Natalia. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you don't already, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.